All right. So on your weekly work menu, you have an assignment titled Doodle Loops. And Doodle Loops is an opportunity for you to write narratives or to write stories. And so what I want to do is go over um, some of the guidelines that are necessary to write a story. I am not actually going to be writing a story, but rather walking you through the tools that you have access to become inspired to write a story. Now, what I can do is go to Google Classroom, and in this case, I'm not going to Mr. Tillish's fourth grade class. Rather, I'm going to the writing portfolio. And in the writing portfolio, fourth graders, under classwork is a section titled narrative writing. You can see at the top by the symbol. The symbol here, the notebook paper again, is the assignment symbol. And then these symbols below, all being the same, are material um, pieces that have been added to the narrative writing section. These pieces will help you to better develop your narrative or your story. So, the first thing that I want to go over is one, the title of the doodle loop that you are going to be writing this week is or has been, What Am I Cooking? And so you can see that that is here for you to click on and type your draft into. Um, Below that is the types of narratives. Now let's go over the types of narratives right quick. This page is going to be crooked. I do apologize. Um, I entered it into our scanner just like this, and that was not the way to do it. Basically, what you have are imaginative narratives, nonfiction narratives, which are narratives that are based on a true story, or a personal narrative here that is a story, a true story, or could be a true story about you, the writer, the author. And so, with these types of narratives, you're going to be able to pick what style do you want to write? Do you want it to be imaginative? Do you want your characters to be make believe? Do you want the problems that are going to be associated with the story to be make believe? Or do you want to write a nonfiction narrative, a story about a time when you were actually somewhere cooking something? And then, or a narrative about somebody else, a biographical story about a chef that has inspired you, or thinking about the little kids that are chefs on them cooking shows. Maybe they are a subject of a narrative that you could write. And then the personal narrative would be, again, your story, a time that you have cooked something. Maybe you want to go and cook something and then write a personal narrative about it or a personal story about it. So, those are your three types. You want to pick now what type of narrative you are going to write, whichever version suits your fancy. So, the next tool that you have access to is writing the beginning of your narrative. Now, writing the beginning of your narrative is very, very important, because if the beginning of your narrative does not capture the reader's attention, it's likely that your narrative will not be finished. The reader is not going to want to read it. And so it's really, really important that you follow some of these strategies here for introducing your story. What I know about you is that you are wonderful story writers. You're telling stories all the time, whether you're writing them or you're telling me them or telling your classmates them. Stories come naturally to children. Your imagination is amazing. It's wonderful. So, if you feel like you've got that strong imagination and you want to write a narrative, or you are writing the narrative on what I'm cooking, you can think about that imaginative narrative. But in any course that you take in writing your narrative, whether it's personal, nonfiction, or imaginative, these beginnings that you see here are going to be great for introducing a narrative in a way that will capture the reader's attention. Again, here you have the setting, being introduced. Then you have an example of the setting being introduced. Where are you? Where does the story take place? Or maybe you want to introduce a character as the beginning of your story, asking a question. Or a great way is to start it off with one of your characters saying something, dialogue. And that is going to require some quotation marks. There is a guide available here in Google Classroom for you to use to remind you of how to include quotation marks. Then you have to write the middle of your narrative. Writing the middle of your narrative is the meat of the story. It's the part of the story that has the majority of the events. Okay. This is where all of your details are going to be, all of the descriptive language that you're going to use so that the reader can, in their mind, be where your characters are. And so reading this document here about the middle is going to help you tremendously. The highlights on these documents here are from another student, and these were the versions of these documents that I had. So do not mind these highlights, but they do bring out some of the important information in each one of them. So that's the middle of your narrative. And then the end of your narrative. Okay, this is where the story is going to be summed up. This is where your story is going to come to a conclusion. This is where you are going to make the reader feel like the story has ended in a way that the reader can now rest easy. The middle got the heart beating fast, created the excitement, and then we call the ending of the story the resolution, the moment in the story when the book can be closed, finished, and the reader can walk away feeling like the story has been wrapped up. No characters are left out. The lesson has been learned, or the moral, the point of the story, it comes alive. So thinking about a narrative about what you are cooking is, the point of the narrative could be, this is why I became a chef, or this is why I want to become somebody that works within a kitchen somewhere. This is why I feel like I am going to remodel my kitchen because I can't cook when I want to cook because I don't have enough space. So I think that the ending of the story is important because you want your reader to walk away feeling like all of the problems, the characters, the events all connect and feel resolved, or you feel good at the end of the story. And then you have, for quotations, you have a document here that will remind you a few reminders about quotation marks, how to use them, where the commas go, where the periods go, what you do when you have a conversation going back and forth between two or more characters. Okay, and remembering to indent every time a new character speaks. Creates your writing in a way that the reader can follow the conversation easily or easier. And then the end punctuation goes inside the quotation marks. Please remember that. All right. The next tool that you have to use for narrative writing, excuse me, I'm going to go back to classwork, scroll on down, and we have character traits. Now, this is depending on what you are going to be writing about, or who you're going to be writing about, or what style of narrative it is that you are going to be writing. Made up? Is it about a nonfiction story about somebody else's life as a moment in life when they were cooking something, maybe, or a personal narrative about you? And so looking at the character traits ahead of time is going to help you create who your characters are going to be and who you want them to become, right? So maybe at the beginning, they are here kind of over on this negative side, the mean and the sadness of characters. And then by the end, they develop into a nice character. The same here, does very little, boring, dull, indifferent, and so on. And then by the end, the resolution or that moment comes because a character has changed into more ambitious or adventurous with their lifestyle choices. And then you have, again, a couple of more negatives, like the uncooperative, the untrustworthy. It's the story that paints a character as someone at the beginning, and as the story has continued, they have evolved or changed into a different person. And of course, that can go from positive to negative as well. But I do want you to think about, and it's important to think about who you want your characters to be, because the characters guide your story. They are the ones that are involved in all of the events and details, and are in the settings of your story. So think about those character traits ahead of time, before starting to write, as you may find yourself having an easier time writing this story. Okay, so the last document that you have are narrative transitions. Now, in transitions in informational and argumentative writing, you're working with first, next, last, to begin with, in addition. Those are very common transitions in informational and in argumentative writing. But in narrative writing, your transitions can be that way, no doubt. But they also can be a bit more interesting. You want to be able to use these transitions to show that your setting is about to change, or the timeline in which your story is taking place has changed. Thinking about like Marvel Cinematic Universe and how all of the time traveling elements, those narrative transitions would be very, very important, so that you can understand where characters are in space and time within your story, within your narrative. And there's some great options here, for what these narratives, or excuse me, what these narrative transitions can be. Time of day, time of year, years themselves. So thinking about these narrative transitions can also help you think about how much time is going to pass in your story, right? And it's great, as we talked about with Island of the Blue Dolphins, and even in Patricia Polacco, our first author study this year, they had a great way, and we to use transitions, and we explored the amazing fact that when you're writing stories, you have control of time. You can make time pass. You can make decades pass with three words. You could make years and years pass using three words, such as by within the following years. However you want to word it, you have control using these narrative transitions of time and space. And so choosing these transitions wisely will again add to the complexity of your story. How complex do you want it? Thinking about those last few films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They were very complex films and how they were having to time travel to solve their problems that they had. And so I think that how much time you want to pass, how many times you want the setting to change, how old you want the characters to get as the story evolves, or working backwards. How young do you want the characters to get? Maybe the characters start off old in the stories, but nonetheless, use these documents within Google Classroom's writing portfolio to complete your doodle loops. And planning your doodle loops comes on this page. And so you're starting off by writing the title, right? What do you want the title to be? Sometimes the title doesn't come until the very end of the story and you're all done, and then you know what you want your title to be. But you have some boxes here. What do you want your settings to be? What's the problem going to be? And what's the solution going to be? The characters, you may want to think about turning your document over on the back and creating a list of who you want your characters to be. It's an awfully small box that you have here to include your characters and all of the information that you want to gather from the character traits handout that is attached to your writing portfolio in Google Classroom. But use the back of this page to jot down your notes. Maybe you're going straight for an imaginative essay, or excuse me, an imaginative narrative. And from there, you can start to draw your diagrams of who do you want your characters to be. All right, give yourself plenty of room. What do you want your settings to be? All right, give yourself lots of room. And then you can start thinking about the plot, the meat of your story here, all of the details of how you want your story to unfold. Okay, so narrative writing is an opportunity for you to become creatively involved in your writing. So good luck with your doodle loops and have a lot of fun with your doodle loops. Okay. Oh yeah. So you only got one of these plan pages. So guess what? When you go to write your second doodle loop, where am I going? You will need to get a blank piece of paper, the back of an old bill. I don't care what it is, but get it, and you'll need to recreate this graphic organizer here. So keep it close. All right. I'm really looking forward to reading these babies out loud. So get to writing and have fun.